A black nurse collapsed from exhaustion on a stranger's shoulder during a red-eye flight, clutching a 6-month-old baby she'd stolen from a hospital to save from human traffickers. The man whose expensive suit she fell against, the man who let her sleep for 3 hours without moving, was Park Ji-hoon, one of the most dangerous Korean crime lords in Los Angeles, commander of an empire built on blood and fear. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known in that moment of vulnerability, was that his organization was the very one trying to sell that baby on the black market. When they landed, his men surrounded her in the terminal, their white tiger tattoos marking them as the same monsters she'd been running from. She tried to fight, screaming, begging for her child back as they held her down. But then Ji-hoon did something no one expected. He ordered them to release her. This cold-blooded killer who hadn't felt anything in 22 years, who'd watched his own sister die as a child and swore never to be weak again, looked at this exhausted black woman fighting with everything she had and remembered what it meant to be human. He made her an offer. Work as his organization's doctor for 6 months, and he'd protect them both while uncovering the truth about who wanted this baby and why. She accepted, walking into a mansion of luxury and violence, not knowing that the child she'd saved was heir to a rival cartel's fortune, and that the most brutal crime lord on the West Coast was already planning to take her back, no matter how many people had to die. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about karma, love, and hidden truths move you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The rain hammered against the windows of St. Francis Public Hospital that cursed Thursday night, as if the heavens themselves wept for the suffering contained within those crumbling walls. Inside the chaotic emergency room, Amara Williams moved like a ghost among the wounded and the dying, her exhausted body operating on nothing but willpower and the stubborn compassion that had always defined this remarkable black woman. 29 years old, with dark circles carved deep beneath her beautiful eyes, she had worked 16 hours straight, and still, she could not bring herself to leave while patients needed her. "Nurse Williams, we need you in Trauma 3. The voice cut through the screaming and the chaos like a knife. Amara's worn sneakers squeaked against the blood-stained linoleum as she rushed toward the trauma bay, her heart pounding with that familiar mixture of adrenaline and dread. What she found there would change everything. A young Asian woman lay on the gurney, semi-conscious, her body writhing in premature labor. Blood soaked the thin hospital sheets, and the woman's eyes, wide with terror and something else, something desperate, locked onto Amara's face. "Please," the woman whispered in accented English, her trembling hand reaching for the black nurse who knelt beside her. "Save baby." Amara gripped that cold hand tightly, feeling the life draining from this stranger, even as new life fought to enter the world. "I've got you," she promised, though her heart screamed the truth. This woman was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The delivery happened in a blur of medical procedures and shouted orders. A tiny girl, impossibly small, slipped into Amara's capable hands, purple and silent, not breathing. The black nurse's training took over, her fingers working with desperate precision to clear the infant's airways, to breathe life into those fragile lungs. And then, a cry, weak but alive. "She's stable," Amara called out, cradling the newborn against her chest even as the monitors behind her began their terrible, flatlining scream. The mother was gone. Amara stood there in that trauma room, holding an orphaned baby girl who weighed barely 4 pounds and felt something crack open inside her exhausted soul. This child had no one. No family waiting in the lobby, no father pacing the hallways, just a dead mother who had whispered her final words in Korean. Words Amara couldn't understand, but felt in her bones were a plea, a desperate prayer for protection. "What's the mother's ID?" demanded Dr. Patterson, already moving toward his next emergency. Amara looked down at the unconscious woman's personal effects, scattered across the steel tray. No wallet, no identification. Nothing except a torn piece of paper with an address scrawled in Korean characters, and a small photograph of this same woman smiling, holding hands with a black man whose face had been deliberately scratched out. "No ID," Amara heard herself say, making a choice she didn't fully understand. Jane Doe. What the black nurse didn't know, couldn't have known in that moment, was that 3 floors above, 2 men in expensive suits were already making phone calls, their voices tight with fury as they reported to their employer that the package had been lost, that complications had arisen, that the woman had died before extraction was complete. Amara worked through the night, personally ensuring the newborn received the best care their underfunded hospital could provide. She named her Maya in the intake forms, a name that meant illusion, magic, the impossible made real. And as she stood by the incubator at 3 a.m, watching this tiny black and Asian baby girl fight for every breath, Amara made a silent vow. "Whatever it takes, I will keep you safe." 2 days passed. Amara barely slept, dividing her time between her regular shifts and checking on Maya obsessively. The baby grew stronger, defying every medical expectation. And then they came. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when 2 men in dark suits entered the pediatric ward, their faces cold and professional, speaking in rapid Korean to each other before switching to perfect English. "We're here for the infant," the taller one stated flatly, presenting documents that looked official but felt wrong in ways Amara's instincts screamed about. "I'm sorry, but who are you exactly?" Amara positioned herself between these strangers and the nursery, every nerve in her body suddenly alert. "Family representatives. The child's maternal uncle has legal guardianship. Then he can come himself, with a lawyer, and proper court documentation." The black nurse's voice was steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. The men exchanged a glance, and in that micro-expression, Amara saw everything she needed to know. These weren't family. These were predators. "Nurse Williams," the second man said softly, too softly. "This doesn't concern you. Step aside." "No." The word hung in the air like a declaration of war. The taller man's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his jacket, and Amara's breath caught. But before anything could happen, Dr. Patterson rounded the corner, chart in hand, and the men smoothly stepped back, their threatening presence evaporating into professional courtesy. "Gentlemen, visiting hours are over. You'll need to leave and return during business hours with proper documentation and a court order." Dr. Patterson's tone brooked no argument. They left. But as they walked away, the shorter one turned back, his eyes finding Amara's with chilling precision. He smiled, a terrible, knowing smile, and the black nurse felt ice slide down her spine. That night, Amara did something she had never done in her 7 years of nursing. She falsified hospital records. She moved Maya to a different wing, changed her intake information, buried her in the system where those men couldn't easily find her. And then she called Child Protective Services, the police, anyone who would listen, reporting her suspicions about human trafficking, about illegal adoption rings, about a newborn in danger. The investigation was opened immediately. Detectives came, took statements, promised action. Amara felt the first flutter of hope, until 48 hours later, when she received the call that the case had been closed due to insufficient evidence and lack of jurisdictional clarity. Just like that. Closed. Amara stood in the hospital parking lot at 2 in the morning, phone still pressed to her ear, and understood with terrible clarity. Whoever wanted Maya had power. Real power. The kind that made investigations disappear and authorities look the other way. The black nurse looked up at the dying stars above Los Angeles and made a decision that would alter the course of her entire life. She couldn't leave Maya in the system. She couldn't trust anyone. So Amara Williams, exhausted, broke, compassionate to her core, took the baby and ran. For 3 weeks, she moved between safe houses, staying with fellow nurses who asked no questions, keeping Maya hidden, working her shifts when she could, and living on whatever money she had left. Every sound made her jump. Every stranger's glance felt like surveillance. And still, she held that tiny girl close and whispered promises she had no idea how to keep. Until the night the phone rang at 3 a.m., and a distorted voice on the other end spoke words that turned her blood to ice. "We know where you are, Nurse Williams. We know about the baby. Run as far as you want. We will find you both." The line went dead. Amara sat in the darkness of her colleague's guest room, Maya sleeping peacefully in her arms, and felt the walls closing in. She had one friend left, one final lifeline. A nursing school classmate who had moved to Seattle, who had always said if Amara ever needed anything. The black nurse booked the last seat on the midnight flight to Seattle with money she didn't have, using a credit card that was already maxed out. She packed nothing except diapers, formula, and the photograph of Maya's mother with the scratched-out face. As the Uber pulled up to LAX at 11 p.m., Amara held Maya close and whispered into that soft baby hair. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to save you. But I swear on everything I have, I will die before I let them take you." What this brave, exhausted black woman didn't know was that in a luxury high-rise across the city, Park Ji-hoon was just landing from Vancouver, his hands still stained with blood from eliminating a rival who had dared question his authority. And in 12 hours, their paths would collide in ways neither could possibly imagine. The rain continued to fall. The first-class cabin of Flight 447 to Seattle was a world Amara Williams had never experienced. Plush leather seats, hushed conversations, the subtle scent of expensive cologne mingling with champagne. But she wasn't supposed to be here. The black nurse clutched Maya closer to her chest, her economy ticket crumpled in her free hand, as the flight attendant guided her to an empty seat near the front of the cabin. "Severe turbulence expected," the attendant explained with practiced sympathy, noticing the exhausted mother with the tiny infant. "We're moving passengers with small children to more stable seating for safety." Amara barely heard the words. Her entire body vibrated with exhaustion and terror. 36 hours without sleep, finally catching up to her worn-down system. She collapsed into the seat, Maya's warm weight against her heart the only thing keeping her tethered to consciousness. The plane's engines hummed to life, and as they lifted into the dark Los Angeles sky, Amara felt tears slide down her cheeks. She was leaving behind everything. Her job, her colleagues, the city she'd called home for 7 years. All for a baby that wasn't even hers. But Maya was hers now. in every way that mattered. 3 rows ahead, Park Ji-hoon sat in isolated stillness, exactly as he preferred. The other first-class passengers gave him a wide berth. Something about the cold perfection of his tailored suit, the dangerous calm in his posture, warned people to keep their distance. Ji-hoon's hands rested motionless on the armrests, but beneath his composed exterior, his mind replayed the events in Vancouver with clinical precision. The rivals pleading, the efficiency of the kill, the message it would send to anyone else who thought to challenge the Betko organization. 22 years in this life, and he felt nothing. No remorse, no satisfaction, just the endless, hollow void where his humanity used to live. The turbulence hit 40 minutes into the flight, sudden and vicious, the plane dropping what felt like hundreds of feet before catching itself. Overhead bins rattled, passengers gasped, and somewhere in economy, a child began to scream. The flight attendants moved quickly, checking seat belts, offering reassurances in voices that couldn't quite hide their own fear. Amara's eyes flew open as Maya started to cry, the baby's small face scrunching in distress. The black nurse tried to comfort her, rocking gently, whispering soothing words. But the turbulence worsened, and her own terror made her hands shake. She hadn't slept, couldn't think. The world blurred at the edges, and despite every intention to stay alert, Amara felt consciousness slipping away from her like water through desperate fingers. Her head fell to the side, coming to rest against something solid and warm. In her last moment of awareness, she registered that she'd slumped against the shoulder of the passenger beside her, but she was too far gone to care, too exhausted to move. Maya settled against her chest, the baby's crying fading to soft whimpers, and mother and child fell into the kind of sleep that comes only from complete depletion. Ji-hoon froze. The weight against his shoulder was slight, but undeniable. A woman's head, her natural hair soft against his neck, her breathing deep and exhausted. His first instinct was violent rejection. No one touched Park Ji-hoon uninvited. No one dared this kind of intimacy with a man who killed without hesitation. His hand moved reflexively, muscles tensing to shove this stranger away. And then he looked down. The woman was black, beautiful in a way that spoke of sleepless nights and endless struggle, her face marked by the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. Dark circles shadowed her closed eyes, and even in sleep, worry creased her brow. But it was what she held that made Ji-hoon's breath catch in his throat. A baby. Impossibly tiny, no more than a few months old, nestled between them with perfect trust. The infant's eyes, enormous, dark, innocent, opened suddenly and fixed on Ji-hoon's face with the kind of fearless curiosity that only children possess. Those eyes studied him, seeming to look past the expensive suit, past the cold mask, directly into the wasteland of his soul. Ji-hoon stared back, unable to move. Something inside him, something he had believed dead for 22 years, buried in the same unmarked grave as his sister Min-ji, trembled, cracked. The baby made a soft sound, not quite a cry, and one tiny hand reached out, fingers grasping at nothing. Without thinking, Ji-hoon extended his own hand, and those impossibly small fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. The contact burned. For 3 hours, Park Ji-hoon sat motionless in that airplane seat, letting a stranger and her child sleep against him, feeling the warmth of their bodies, the trust they placed in him without knowing what he truly was. He watched the baby's chest rise and fall with each breath, studied the exhausted woman's face, and felt something he couldn't name unfold in the frozen chamber of his heart. When was the last time anyone had touched him without fear? When was the last time someone had been this vulnerable in his presence and survived? When the plane finally landed in Seattle at 3 in the morning, the jolt of wheels hitting runway woke Amara with a gasp. She jerked upright, disoriented, and realized with mounting horror where she was. Slumped against a stranger, Maya cradled between them. Her eyes met those of the man beside her, and her breath caught. He was Korean, perhaps late 30s, with a face carved from ice and shadows, beautiful in the way sharp knives are beautiful. His suit probably cost more than Amara made in 6 months. And his eyes, God, his eyes, were the darkest, most unsettling thing she'd ever seen. Empty, bottomless. The eyes of a man who had witnessed terrible things and felt nothing. "I'm so sorry," Amara stammered, scrambling to gather Maya and her belongings, shame flooding her cheeks with heat. "I didn't mean to. I was just so tired, The baby is dehydrated." Ji-hoon's voice cut through her apologies, calm and authoritative. "You need help." Amara blinked, looking down at Maya, and realized with a nurse's trained eye that he was right. The infant's lips were slightly dry, her skin lacking its usual elasticity. How had she missed it? How had her exhaustion made her so careless? "I can manage," the black woman said automatically, defensive pride rising even through her fear. "Thank you for your concern, but we're fine." Ji-hoon stood, his tall frame unfolding with predatory grace, and extended his arms. "Give me the child." "What? No!" Amara clutched Maya protectively. "I don't even know you." "You slept on my shoulder for 3 hours." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dead eyes. "If I wanted to hurt you, I would have done it already. The baby needs water. I have resources. Let me help." Every instinct screamed at Amara to run, but Maya chose that moment to whimper, and the sound broke through the black nurse's resistance. She was so tired, so alone. And this stranger was right about her baby needing help. Before she could formulate a response, Ji-hoon simply reached out and took Maya from her arms with surprising gentleness, cradling the infant with the kind of practiced care that suggested hidden depths. He turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Amara no choice but to grab her bag and follow, her heart pounding with equal parts terror and desperate hope. The terminal was nearly deserted at this hour, their footsteps echoing on polished floors. Ji-hoon moved with purpose toward the exit, and Amara hurried to keep pace, questions dying on her lips. Where was he taking them? Who was this man? Why was he helping? And then she saw them. 3 men in dark suits materialized from different directions, converging on Ji-hoon with military precision. Their faces were expressionless, professional, dangerous. And on the wrist of the nearest one, barely visible beneath his cuff, was a tattoo, a white tiger, rendered in stark black ink. Amara's world stopped. She had seen that exact tattoo before, on the wrists of the 2 men who had come to the hospital demanding Maya, on the wrist of the shorter man who had smiled at her with such chilling promise before disappearing into the night. The black nurse's knees nearly buckled as the terrible truth crashed over her like a wave of ice water. This man who had held her baby with tenderness, who had let her sleep on his shoulder, who had spoken of helping them, he was one of them. He was part of the organization that wanted to take Maya, to sell her, to destroy her. She had handed her child directly to the enemy. "Give her back," Amara whispered, Then louder, her voice breaking with panic. "Give me my baby back!" She lunged for Maya, but the three men moved faster, blocking her path with bodies that felt like walls. One of them spoke in rapid Korean to Ji-hoon, and though Amara couldn't understand the words, she heard the tone. Cold, businesslike, fatal. Another man translated, his English accented but clear. "You have made a serious mistake, Nurse Williams. This child is worth a great deal of money. You should not have interfered." Amara's blood turned to ice. They knew her name. They had known all along. This had been a trap, and she had walked into it carrying her most precious treasure. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face, still fighting against the iron grip of the men holding her back. "Please don't hurt her. She's just a baby. Please." Ji-hoon stood motionless, Maya still cradled in his arms, and studied the black woman's face with those terrible, empty eyes. He watched her fight with everything she had, watched her prepare to die for this child that wasn't even hers by blood, watched the kind of selfless courage he hadn't witnessed in decades. And something inside him, that thing that had cracked during the flight, broke open completely. "Release her," Ji-hoon said quietly. The men froze, uncertainty flickering across their professional masks. "Sir?" "I said release her." His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the silk now, the unmistakable tone of absolute authority. The men stepped back immediately, and Amara stumbled forward, gasping. She reached for Maya, but Ji-hoon didn't hand the baby over. Instead, he looked at the black nurse with an expression she couldn't read. Something almost like curiosity, or perhaps recognition. "You saved this child from my organization," he said softly, speaking to her directly for the first time since the plane. "Interesting." "I don't care who you are," Amara said through her tears, her voice shaking but defiant. "I won't let you sell her. I won't." Ji-hoon's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but it was cold and dangerous, the smile of a predator appreciating worthy prey. "Come with me. We need to talk." He glanced at his men. "Or I can let them resolve this situation right here, right now." The threat was clear. Amara looked at the three men, at their cold faces and dangerous stillness, and knew she had no choice, no power, no escape. She followed Pak Ji-hoon into the darkness, toward a fate she couldn't imagine, carrying nothing but her love for a child and the terrible knowledge that she had just walked into hell itself. And somewhere, deep in her terrified heart, a small voice whispered, "Why did he let me go? Why didn't he hurt me when he had the chance?" The limousine was a fortress on wheels, bulletproof glass, leather interior that smelled of money and violence, a partition separating them from the driver that promised privacy for whatever horrors awaited. Amara sat rigid in the plush seat, her eyes never leaving Maya, who remained cradled in Ji-hoon's arms with unsettling contentment. The baby had stopped fussing completely, as if she somehow sensed that this dangerous stranger meant her no harm. But Amara knew better. She had seen too much, survived too many nights in dangerous neighborhoods, treated too many victims of violence to believe in the kindness of men like this. Men with dead eyes and loyal soldiers. Men who operated above the law. "Where are you taking us?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Ji-hoon didn't answer immediately. He pressed a button, and a panel slid open to reveal bottles of water. He handed one to Amara, then carefully adjusted Maya in his arms and offered the baby small sips from a second bottle with practiced precision that made Amara's stomach turn. How many children had he handled? How many had he trafficked? "Beverly Hills," he finally said. "My home." "So you can kill us in private?" The words escaped before Amara could stop them, raw and terrified. Those empty eyes fixed on her face, and for a long moment, Ji-hoon simply studied her with the intensity of someone examining a fascinating specimen. "If I wanted you dead, Nurse Williams, you would already be dead. I don't waste time on theatrics." The casual certainty in his voice made Amara's skin crawl. "Then what do you want?" "To understand." He looked down at Maya, something shifting in his expression, something almost human. 3 weeks ago, my organization was contracted to transport a package. A routine job. The client paid handsomely for discretion and speed. But there were complications. The woman died during childbirth, and the client disappeared. My subordinates decided independently to recoup their losses by selling the child on the black market. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I did not authorize this. Amara's breath caught. "You're saying you didn't know they were going to sell her?" "I didn't know the package was a pregnant woman at all." For the first time, something that might have been shame flickered across Ji-hoon's face. "My men handle operational details. I focus on strategy, territory, larger concerns. By the time I learned what they'd done, you had already hidden the child and triggered an investigation that cost me considerable resources to suppress." "Good," Amara spat, fury overwhelming fear. "I hope it cost you everything." Ji-hoon's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You have fire. I respect that. But you're also foolish. Do you understand what you've done? You've made enemies of people who don't forgive, who don't forget. Those men at the hospital, they weren't going to stop. They were going to find you eventually, take the child, and eliminate you as a witness." "Then why did you stop them just now?" Amara demanded. "If you're all the same monsters, why didn't you just let them take Maya and kill me?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ji-hoon looked down at the baby in his arms, then back at the black woman who had fought 3 armed men with nothing but love and desperation. "Because," he said slowly, as if discovering the words as he spoke them, "when you slept on my shoulder on that plane, holding this child with such fierce protection even in unconsciousness, I remembered something I thought I had forgotten. I remembered what it feels like to care about someone vulnerable, to want to protect instead of destroy." Amara stared at him, searching those dead eyes for any sign of deception, any hint of manipulation. What she found instead was something far more disturbing. Genuine confusion, as if Ji-hoon himself didn't understand his own motivations. "I don't believe you," she whispered. "I don't blame you." Ji-hoon handed Maya back to her mother with careful gentleness. "But I'm going to make you an offer anyway. Work for me as the Bekko organization's personal physician. 6 months. I'll pay you more than you'd make in 5 years at that hospital. In exchange, I guarantee complete protection for you and the child, and I personally investigate who this baby really is, and why someone wanted her badly enough to risk exposure." "You want me to work for criminals?" Amara's voice rose with incredulity. "Patch up gunshot wounds and overdoses while you destroy lives?" "Yes. No apology, no justification. Just brutal honesty." "And if I refuse?" Ji-hoon's expression hardened back into ice. "Then I let you walk out of this car right now, with the child, and wish you luck surviving the next 48 hours. Because the men who want Maya don't work for me. They work for themselves now, and they will find you. Or worse, the people who originally wanted her will find you first. Either way, you'll both be dead by the end of the week." The terrible truth of his words settled over Amara like a shroud. She looked down at Maya, this precious child she'd promised to protect, and felt the weight of impossible choices crushing her chest. "Why?" she asked again, her voice breaking. "Why would you protect us? What's in it for you?" Ji-hoon turned to stare out the tinted window at the dark streets of Los Angeles rolling past. When he spoke, his voice was so soft Amara almost didn't hear it. "When I was 16 years old, I had a sister, Minji. She was 8. We lived on the streets of Busan, surviving on whatever we could steal or beg. One night, she got sick. Pneumonia, I think. I carried her to 3 different hospitals, begging them to help her. But no one would treat us without money or insurance. I held her in my arms and watched her suffocate, watched her die, while doctors and nurses walked past us like we were garbage." His hands clenched into fists. "I swore that night that I would never be powerless again. Never be the one begging. I would become the one with power, with money, with control. And I did. I built an empire on blood and fear. I became everything I needed to be to survive." He turned back to face Amara, and for the first time she saw something alive in those eyes. Pain, old and deep, and never healed. "But when I look at you fighting for this child with nothing but love and courage, when I see you willing to die to protect someone vulnerable, I see the person I used to be before Minji died. Before I became this." He gestured at himself, at the expensive suit, at the armed guards outside. And I realized that I didn't become powerful. I became the exact kind of monster who let my sister die. Tears slid down Amara's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "You can't undo what you've done. You can't save your sister by saving us." "I know." Ji-hoon's voice was hollow. "But maybe I can prevent someone else from becoming what I became. Maybe I can give one child the chance Minji never had." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. 6 months, Amara. Let me protect you and Maya while I investigate the truth. Let me prove that I'm not completely beyond redemption. And if at the end of 6 months you want to leave, I'll give you new identities, money, and a way to disappear where no one will ever find you." Amara held Maya closer, the baby's heartbeat steady against her chest. Every logical part of her brain screamed to refuse, to run, to never trust a man who admitted to building his empire on blood. But the nurse in her, the part that had spent 7 years treating the desperate and the dying, recognized something in Ji-hoon's eyes that she couldn't ignore. He was telling the truth, and he was offering the only real chance she had to keep Maya alive. 6 months, she heard herself say. "But I have conditions. I don't participate in anything that harms innocent people. I don't cover up murders. And if I find out you lied to me about any of this, I take Maya and I run, and you let us go." Ji-hoon extended his hand. "Agreed." Amara stared at that hand, the hand that had killed, that had ordered deaths, that had built an empire of violence, and slowly, carefully, placed her own hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, surprisingly gentle. "One more thing," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling. "You said you'd investigate who Maya really is. I want to know everything. The mother, the father, why someone wanted her. Everything. You'll know everything I discover." Ji-hoon released her hand. "I promise you that." The limousine pulled through massive iron gates into a compound that looked more like a military installation than a home. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, cameras tracked every angle, and the mansion itself rose against the night sky like a monument to wealth and power. As they stepped out of the car, Maya, still sleeping peacefully in Amara's arms, the black nurse looked up at the fortress that would be her prison and her sanctuary for the next 6 months. "Welcome to your new home," Ji-hoon said quietly. Amara didn't respond. She just held Maya tighter and whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her. A prayer for protection, for wisdom, for the strength to survive in the house of a monster who might be the only thing standing between her baby and death. What neither of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know in that moment, was that 3,000 miles away, in a penthouse in New York City, a man named Kim Tae-wook was receiving a phone call that would set in motion a chain of events ending in blood and fire and impossible choices. "We found her," the voice on the phone reported. "The daughter of Kim Soo-yeon. She's alive, and she's with Park Ji-hoon." Tae-wook's hand tightened on his glass of whiskey, his knuckles white with rage. "Then we take her back, and we kill everyone who stands in our way. Everyone." The war had begun, and Amara Williams, exhausted black nurse who just wanted to protect one innocent child, had walked directly into the center of it. The months that followed transformed Amara's existence in ways she could never have imagined. The guest suite Ji-hoon provided was larger than the apartment she'd shared with 3 roommates in nursing school. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens, a nursery equipped with everything a baby could need, furniture that cost more than she'd earned in entire years. Maya thrived in this protected bubble, growing stronger each day, her laugh becoming the only pure sound in a house built on violence and fear. But the price of this luxury was written in blood. Amara's first week as the Beko organization's physician shattered whatever innocence she had left. A man arrived at 3 a.m. with a bullet wound in his chest, his eyes wild with pain and terror. She saved his life with steady hands and professional detachment, but as she worked, she heard Ji-hoon interrogating him in the next room. Cold questions about loyalty and betrayal, punctuated by sounds that made her stomach turn. The man disappeared after that. She never saw him again. She didn't ask what happened. The second week brought an overdose case. A young woman, barely 20, her veins collapsed from repeated injections of the same drugs Ji-hoon's organization distributed across the city. Amara fought for 2 hours to keep her alive, pumping her chest, forcing air into failing lungs, refusing to let another soul slip away on her watch. When the girl finally gasped back to consciousness, Amara held her and whispered promises of help, of rehabilitation, of escape from this life. Ji-hoon, watching from the doorway, said nothing. But the next day, the young woman was gone. Transferred, he claimed, to a private facility that specialized in addiction treatment. Amara wanted to believe him. She chose to believe him, because the alternative was unbearable. Every night, after Maya fell asleep in her pristine nursery, Amara stood at her window and stared out at the lights of Los Angeles, feeling the weight of her compromises crushing her chest. She was healing people who would go right back out to hurt others. She was accepting money stained with the suffering of countless victims. She was living in comfort built on the destruction of families and communities. But Maya was safe. Maya was healthy. Maya was alive. And wasn't that worth anything? Wasn't that worth everything? Ji-hoon maintained careful distance during those first months, appearing only for brief check-ins. his manner always professional and cold. But Amara noticed things. Small things that didn't fit the monster everyone said he was. He never allowed children to be present during violent operations. He donated anonymously to the same public hospitals his organization's drug trade ultimately filled with patients. And sometimes, late at night, when he thought no one was watching, she would find him standing outside Maya's nursery, just staring at the sleeping baby with an expression of such profound pain that it made Amara's heart ache. One evening in her 3rd month at the mansion, Amara brought Maya downstairs for dinner, something she rarely did, preferring to keep the baby away from Ji-hoon's world as much as possible. But Maya had been fussy all day, and Amara was exhausted, and the huge dining room was empty except for Ji-hoon, sitting alone at one end of a table that could seat 20. He looked up when they entered, surprise flickering across his usually impassive face. "I'm sorry," Amara started. "I didn't realize you were—" "Stay." The word was almost a plea. "Please." So they stayed. Amara sat at the opposite end of the long table, Maya in her arms, and they ate in silence. The black nurse who had saved lives, the Korean mobster who had taken them, and the baby who connected them in ways neither fully understood. "She looks healthy," Ji-hoon said eventually, his eyes on Maya. "She is. Growing perfectly." Amara shifted the baby to her other arm. "Have you found anything? About who she really is?" Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. "Yes, and it's worse than I thought." He told her everything then. About Kim Soo-yeon, daughter of a powerful Korean crime family, who had fallen in love with an American man, a black soldier stationed in Seoul. About how her family had forbidden the relationship, arranged her marriage to a rival family's son to cement a business alliance. About how Soo-yeon had run, pregnant and desperate, making it all the way to Los Angeles before giving birth prematurely in that emergency room where Amara had tried to save her life. "The man who wants her, Kim Tae-wook, is Soo-yeon's brother," Ji-hoon continued, his voice hard. "He doesn't want Maya out of love. He wants her because she's the legitimate heir to the Kim family fortune. With her under his control, he can consolidate power and eliminate his rivals. She's worth more as a pawn than as a person." Amara's arms tightened protectively around the baby. "Then we don't let him have her." "It's not that simple." Ji-hoon's eyes met hers across the length of the table. "Tae-wook is powerful, ruthless, and connected to every major cartel on the West Coast. He's been searching for Maya since her mother died. And 3 days ago, my sources confirmed he knows she's here. With me." The world seemed to tilt. What does that mean? It means we have very little time before he makes his move. Ji-hoon stood, walking slowly toward her end of the table. "I've increased security. No one gets in or out without my personal authorization. But Tae-wook doesn't play by conventional rules. He'll find a way." He stopped a few feet from Amara, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried that matched her own. "I won't let him take her," Ji-hoon said softly. "I swear to you, Amara, whatever it costs." Why? The question that had haunted her for 3 months finally escaped. "Why do you care so much? She's not your daughter. I'm not your wife. We're nothing to you." Ji-hoon reached out slowly, giving Amara time to pull away, and gently touched Maya's small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb, holding on with that simple trust that children give so freely. "When Minji died in my arms, I felt something break inside me that I thought could never be repaired," he said, his voice raw with emotion he could no longer hide. "I spent 22 years building walls, becoming harder, colder, more powerful. convincing myself that feeling nothing was the same as being strong. But then you fell asleep on my shoulder on that plane, trusting a complete stranger to keep you safe. And Maya looked at me with those eyes that saw past everything I'd become. And I felt that broken thing inside me start to beat again. He looked up at Amara, and she saw tears, actual tears, gathering in those eyes she'd thought were incapable of crying. "You make me remember what it's like to be human," Jihoon whispered. "You and Maya. You make me believe that maybe, despite everything I've done, there's still something in me worth saving. And I know I don't deserve that gift. I know I've done terrible things, unforgivable things. But when I'm near you, I remember who I was before the world turned me into a monster. I remember the boy who loved his sister, the boy who believed in protecting the weak instead of exploiting them." Amara's breath caught in her throat. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was manipulation, that monsters didn't change, that she was being played. But the nurse in her, the part that had spent years reading people's pain, recognized the truth in his voice. Park Ji-hoon wasn't lying. He was terrified. "I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. "Say you'll let me protect you. Say you won't leave when the 6 months are up. At least, not until Maya is truly safe." Ji-hoon's hand trembled slightly where it touched the baby's tiny fingers. "Say you don't hate me for what I am." Amara looked down at Maya, this beautiful child born from forbidden love and raised in the shadow of violence, and then back up at the broken man who had somehow become their protector and their jailer in equal measure. "I don't hate you," she said finally. "I hate what you do. I hate the empire you've built. But you, the person underneath all that blood and power, I think I'm starting to understand you. And that terrifies me more than anything else." Their eyes locked across the small space between them, and something shifted, something deep and dangerous and impossible to take back. Ji-hoon leaned forward slowly, giving Amara every opportunity to pull away, to reject him, to maintain the distance that kept them both safe. She didn't move. His lips touched hers with devastating gentleness, a kiss that tasted like redemption and damnation intertwined. Amara felt tears slide down her cheeks even as she kissed him back, her free hand reaching up to touch his face, feeling the warmth of skin that had seemed so cold, the humanity of a man everyone called a monster. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ji-hoon rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I don't know how it happened, or when, but I love you, Amara Williams. I love your courage and your compassion, and the way you fight for what's right, even when the whole world is against you. I love how you look at Maya like she's the most precious thing in existence. I love—" "Stop." Amara's voice broke. "Please stop. Because I'm falling in love with you too, and I can't love someone who does what you do. I can't love a man whose hands are stained with blood." "Then let me change." Ji-hoon pulled back slightly, his eyes desperate and determined. "Let me become someone worthy of you, someone Maya could be proud to know. I can't undo the past, but I can choose differently going forward. I can—" The explosion shattered the moment. The entire mansion rocked with the force of it, windows blowing inward in a spray of glass, alarms screaming, the sound of gunfire erupting from every direction. Ji-hoon moved with terrifying speed, pulling Amara and Maya down behind the overturned table as bullets tore through the dining room walls. "They're here," he said flatly, all emotion vanishing from his face as he transformed back into the cold, efficient killer. "Taewook's men. They're attacking the compound." "What do we do?" Amara clutched Maya to her chest, the baby screaming in terror. Ji-hoon pulled a gun from inside his jacket, a weapon he'd carried even during their intimate moment, always ready for violence, and checked the ammunition with practiced ease. "There's a safe room, basement level. I'll get you there, and then I'll handle this." "You can't fight all of them." "Watch me." He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a hidden door in the wall. "The safe room has everything you need: food, water, communications equipment. Lock yourself in and don't open it for anyone except me. Do you understand?" Amara nodded, too terrified to argue. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of fighting, Ji-hoon moving with deadly precision, shooting 3 attackers without breaking stride. They made it to the basement, to a reinforced steel door that looked like it could withstand a nuclear blast. Ji-hoon opened it, revealing a room full of supplies and equipment. He pushed Amara inside, gently but firmly. "Wait," she grabbed his arm, Maya still screaming between them. "Don't die. Please. I just found you. He kissed her, hard, desperately, a kiss that tasted like goodbye. "I won't die. I have too much to live for now. I'll come back to you, Amara. I swear it." Then he closed the door, and Amara heard the locks engaging with terrible finality. She sank to the floor of the safe room, holding Maya close, listening to the sounds of battle raging above them. Gunfire, explosions, screams. Hours passed. The sounds grew worse, then suddenly stopped, leaving only terrible silence. Amara didn't know if Ji-hoon was alive or dead. Didn't know if Tae-wook's men had won or lost. Didn't know if this steel room was her sanctuary or her tomb. She just held Maya and whispered prayers and waited for either rescue or death to claim them. And somewhere, in the blood-soaked ruins of the mansion above, Park Ji-hoon faced Kim Tae-wook for the first time, 2 predators circling each other over the fate of one innocent child, ready to kill or die for the woman they loved in different ways, one as possession, one as redemption. The final battle had begun. And before the sun rose over Los Angeles, nothing would ever be the same again. If this story moved you, pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been forced to compromise your values to protect someone you love? Have you ever seen humanity in someone the world called a monster? Or witnessed how love can crack open even the most hardened heart? Have you ever had to choose between safety and freedom, between survival and your soul? Tell us about your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories about redemption, sacrifice, and the power of love to transform even the darkest souls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.